You build a group on WhatsApp, build a Facebook group, build an Insta channel. You're just helping Mark Zuckerberg get richer.
Pip Jamieson is the founder and CEO of The Dots, a professional network for people in the creative industry. You could call it LinkedIn for the creatives.
So I've raised now just shy of 10 million.
There aren't many female founders that have done that. In less than 10 years, she has scaled The Dots to 1 million members. What are the benefits of being a dyslexic entrepreneur?
It's changing my life. When we were like cave people, it was definitely an autistic child who worked out how to rub sticks together to make fire. 35% of entrepreneurs are dyslexic and 40% are self-made millionaires. Steve Jobs was dyslexic, autistic, ADHD, and there is a reason for that, is because...
Make sure you subscribe so we can continue to get bigger and bigger guests. Pip, welcome back to Jimmy's Jobs of the Future.
Ah, it's amazing.
Our second ever guest is back, and I re-listened to the episode this week, and it was, I mean, my gosh, talk about a trip down memory lane. I was so stiff at asking questions. And the other irony of it is, in the interview, I say to you, I'm not a creative, and here you are now at the home of our new creative studio, Boxlight. So it's real, like, round circle thing. But tell us what you've kind of been up to in the last 4 years. It is one of my favourite episodes. I'll say in the intro, people really should go and check it out, because I think you embody so much of the future of work. And it was the first time I'd really heard the phrase no-collar worker as well, which is definitely something I use a lot now. So yeah, how have the last 4 years been?
Oh my gosh, do you know, I remember that podcast so well, because you came onto my houseboat in King's Cross, and we literally were just coming out of lockdown. I think I had my jab around either the day or the day after, and I think it was the first human I'd sort of seen in a while. So, but it was just really exciting to have you on there as like a human talking about work and not behind a Zoom screen. But yeah, I mean, so much has happened, because obviously on that episode, I was talking a lot about my business, The Dots. So, you know, I created a networking solution for the creative industries, and that's where the whole "I'm not a creative" came about, because you know, my premise is everyone is a creative. You know, that's what makes us distinct from other animals. Really, is our capacity to have creative thoughts and solve problems. So yeah, I started the platform for my own community, which was, well, it is over 1 million members. But then the weirdest thing that was happening actually around the time that we were chatting, but I couldn't talk publicly about it, is twofold. I was raising around, which I have gone on and successfully done. So I've raised now just shy of 10 million. But the other thing that was happening...
There aren't many female founders that have done that, right? Like raised 10 million. Like you sort of say it as it's just like a minor kind of like thing, but like...
No, I mean, sadly not. So
actually, changed much in the last 4 years either.
Well, actually, it's got worse.
Yeah,
Jimmy.
Exactly.
So yeah, it was around 3.8 when I raised, and now it's less than 2%. Now I will say, in many ways, I'm actually one of the lucky ones, because if you're a woman of colour, don't even get me started. So I mean, yes, but anyway, so yes, I've raised that amount of capital. So yes, we successfully closed the round, but actually what was happening simultaneously while we were having that conversation is I got approached by the Soho House group. They wanted to launch an app for Soho Works, which is their co-working space. They loved the Dots app, and so they wanted or convinced me to white label it. So I started white labeling the Dots. And so since then, we've now grown to we've got over 45 apps.
And you won some, like, a Webby last night, right?
So it's the Lovies, which is the Europe's equivalent of the Webbies, but they're owned by the Webbies. So it's basically that. So it is the Webbies, but they call it the Lovies. So yeah, I got 2 awards last night, which is amazing. Well, I say my team did. It's them who did this.
They're very, very gracious of you. But even I've heard of them, right? And that, like, whilst I now admit I am a creative, I certainly not steeped in creative background per se, but even I'd heard of it. So tell us all about them.
So, yeah, I mean, it's so funny. I actually judge one of the Webbies in the US. I judge the Anthem Award, which is actually for technical businesses that are having positive impact. But I'd never actually been up for one, not even for the original Dots. But this is the first time we were up for award for our white label business, because that is now the business. 95% of my revenue comes from white labeling the Dots.
So a company approaches you, and because there's a bit of a perception that apps are finished.
Yeah.
Right? Like, when was the last time you actually downloaded an app and used it, right? Like, it's all sort of, that whole kind of like app economy seems to have gone. Obviously not now, it's making 95% of your revenue. So talk us about like what these, so it's for communities like a Soho House, etc.
Yeah, so we work for like private member communities, loyalty communities, co-working spaces, so places where people have basically paid to be part of a membership.
Yeah.
And I completely agree with you, Jimmy. If you ask someone to download another app, everyone's like, oh, I've got enough apps. And you know, everyone's phone is a graveyard of apps that they've downloaded and never used. I am very proud that our average monthly engagement is 72% across all our partner apps, which is, LinkedIn's only 35%. So I finally beat LinkedIn just in another way. But yeah, I mean, the reality is lots of people were building apps that weren't delivering enough value for the people. So, for example, in a co-working environment, people were rolling out booking apps, right? You'll use it if you book, maybe. There's not necessarily enough value to keep you coming back. So what we do is we do the networking community side. So, for example, Soho Works can post the events that they're hosting, and they do these amazing events at Soho Works. You then RSVP via the app, but then you can check out the guest list. And so you can then connect with people in advance. And actually, it's just replicating what their members were doing anyway. They were meeting at a Soho Works event, but they were connecting on LinkedIn or WhatsApp, or they were forgetting to connect or losing details. So now all of that communication and direct messaging and group chats is all happening in the Soho Works app, which then brings people constantly back to the app. And then from there, we only look after the networking side of things. Okay. And then our partners can integrate their technology stacks into us. So with Soho Works example, they make money through meeting room bookings. They integrate their meeting room booking technology into us. We're just about to go live with our first investment network, and they've integrated their deal room into us. So we can integrate like any booking technology, e-com, media. So we power Days Media, Dazed and Confused. We power their Days Club, and they've integrated their magazine into us.
Okay.
So yeah, we kind of look after the engagement, and then from that engagement, our partners make money.
That's really interesting, because, and presumably as well, right? I'm being going to show my non-technical side now, but like, it can also sit on a desktop, right? Because an app is like, and this is where I think like apps get a bit kind of like confusing. It's a bit like podcasts, right? All podcasts are video now, so like, what is it? But like, the changing nature of all these things is that it sits online anyway, because actually using your phone can be quite fiddly if you want to check out somebody's profile or whatever, presumably. But so when did you when were you like, because we were talking a lot through the period of when it was starting, but when did you think, this is the way we're going to make money?
Oh my God, I love to say it was my like genius eureka moment idea. It wasn't. It was literally just Soho House. I'd always been a fan of the brand, and you know, biggest compliment being asked to, you know, we love your app, will you white label it? So it sort of came about serendipitously, and to be completely honest, it was COVID. So we had come out of the other end. So with the original Dots community, we made money through people hiring through the site. We didn't recruit them or match them, but people hired through the site. Obviously, that was a challenging time during COVID. And what I hated about the job model as a business model is whenever my members and community wanted work, there weren't any jobs. And whenever there were loads of jobs, there weren't enough people. It was just a horrible business model. And it was very susceptible to the ebbs and flows of economic fluctuations.
Yes.
So what's beautiful about this is I no longer have to worry about a two-sided marketplace. I don't have to worry about how many members do I have? Do I have enough jobs? Do I have enough jobs for the members? And this kind of constant growth challenge of clients, members. Now I just have to worry about the tech and selling that tech to brilliant partners. But then they onboard their membership and they onboard their commercial levers.
So what else are people using it for? Because I think this sort of community aspect of brands is really interesting and a really fast kind of growing area. And like you've seen the likes of Gymshark build like really big like social media communities. But I do think that, you're clearly more than on something. You're like 50 partners, but like it's clearly that sort of next stage of that like private community is going to be a bigger deal for it, right? So what are people using it for? And give us some other examples. I mean, I know Soho House is the hero kind of brand.
So if you think about the investment community, they're talking about how to support they're only for investors only in this community. So it's how to support their portfolio. They basically put up like updates on the deals that they've been doing. They discuss how like basically they're structuring their cap tables and how to help their founders do exits. So that's sort of the investor side. And then you've got like, we look after Freeze Art Fairs, Freeze 91 community, which is their like high net wealth art collectors. So these are very wealthy people who basically want the Freeze VIP experience. They just all discuss about what is the best shows to go to and swapping leads in terms of where artworks are going. And then we look after an entrepreneurs network, and that's all about like, how do I raise investment? How do I grow my business? So it's all really the things that are happening elsewhere and actually happening in the real world, but it's just we lean into questions and answers as opposed to, I guess, posts, which are more the content-based posts that you'd get in a bigger network.
Yeah. But it is because it's like a sort of internet, isn't it? So I'm thinking of like a couple of the sort of VC firms that I'm invested in and whatever, and actually you could totally see how this could sort of work. You can hear and see the cogs whirring. But like, I get an email newsletter every month of a summary of everything, and then you get your kind of like quarterly portfolio update. But actually, you could all put all that in a space and so on. And occasionally, you'll get somebody get in touch with you directly. But I can totally see how this.
Yeah, I mean, we've very much leaned into how do we actually help the communities, like really deliver value. So these are small communities, like, there are 1,000 to maybe 10,000 people. If you post a article, you're going to get not as many likes as if you posted on LinkedIn. So you're not going to get as much value there. But these are trusted networks. So if you need help or advice, you will get replies from people you actually know and trust. And that's where the magic happens. So for example, on Soho Works, they're all looking for recommendations. They're all looking for clients. They're all swapping leads in terms of hiring freelancers. Can you recommend a brilliant podcast producer? Can you recommend a brilliant podcast studio?
Yes, that.
So these are the sort of things that you don't really get on mass networks because you don't trust everyone that's in that mass network. I think what's also interesting, and especially with the younger generation, there's this increasing disillusionment with Meta. And from the brand side, I think brands are starting to go, oh my God, we're just giving our communities and engagement to Meta. So you build a group on WhatsApp and you build a Facebook group or you build an Insta channel, you're just helping Mark Zuckerberg get richer because all they're trying to do is bring engagement back to Instagram. So if I'm on WhatsApp, for example, and I get a notification from a group I'm in, the next group I look at is my family, WhatsApp group or whatever notification. That's fueling Meta's business model. That is not fueling the business model of the people that are building communities. So I think two things are happening simultaneously. It's a lack of trust in Meta, especially from the younger generation. And from the brands, they're like, this is crazy. So for example, with media companies, they've given all of their audience to social media. They now have to pay to reach them. I mean, that's mad, right? Why don't you own your own engagement? So Days now owns their community. So much easier to communicate with that community, which is magical.
Really hope our biggest fan, Nick Clegg, doesn't listen to this episode. It's all right. Last time you came on, you chat all over Twitter. So it did remind me that Twitter was bad, actually, but has been struggling for a while. But I think that, but it is that thing, isn't it, of like the community kind of becoming valuable. But another word for it, like to be a little bit of a kind of like capitalist about it, is like it's customers as well, right? Yeah. Like customers is community and whatever. Like, and it's so, but a sort of old school term for it, I guess, is almost customer service and customer engagement. Yeah. But so what else are kind of people using it for? There must be so many different kind of use cases that you've got, right? Because it's a big investment these people are making in it. Like, it won't be cheap.
Yeah, I mean, we're not cheap. The honest truth, Jimmy, this happened so organically, right? It was Soho House was the first client, and then people started using it. We power an Apple community now. We power Freeze. We power, it was all people who used one of our products who then just got in touch. So this has all just gone vroom. Yeah. I've only just started talking about it publicly, and that's just because I just haven't really had the time, and the lovey Webby sort of forced the thing because I got this award. And so actually, I don't know if you saw when we announced, but I was like, I'm not sure if anyone knows that this even has happened, but we just got this award for it. And so, for us, we come into our own for big enterprise clients. So we tend to work with like private member clubs, co-working spaces, property companies, people with very complex tech stacks. But what's been interesting is everyone's launching a club. It's the most ridiculous thing. And I'm not just even physical clubs like Soho House. You've got like the new Kensington Roof Gardens and Coco and all of this stuff. But it's more loyalty clubs you're seeing everywhere. So, all of the luxury car brands now have member clubs. You buy £500,000 car, you join a club. You've got things like Amex. They've just opened a space for their Centurions in New York. It's a private member club for the billionaires that use Amex.
What's an Amex Centurion?
So Centurion is if you're going to have to look it up, but basically they're billionaires. They're spending a certain amount using Amex. So they're in their top like 0.05. So they're right up the top. Right. So what brands are starting to kind of tap into is there's this sort of group of very loyal people that also have a vested interest to meet each other. A load of high-spending Amex customers want to meet each other, hence the reason they've just launched a club. There's an Explorers Club launching here in the UK now, which is actually backed by Bezos, which is all about, Arctic explorers, and everyone is building these kind of smaller communities. And that's kind of what the magic is. But really, we only work if there is a real community that exists already and that they are coming together in the real world. I do not believe that communities exist purely digitally. I think a lot of the magic happens in a space. So every community we work with had already got a community, usually around like 500 to 1,000 plus. They had events or supper clubs or things they were doing, and some of them had spaces. We just overlay and connect the dots between those in real life moments.
I'm going to come on to how you reposition yourself as a brand, yourselves as a brand. But I also think it's interesting because the head of community, I remember I just had a flashback to an episode I did with Alice Bentonick of Entrepreneur First. Because I was like, you've got like head of global community. That sounds like quite a new job, a job of the future. And she was like, sort of, but it's a bit like alumni relations, really. And like universities have had those for ages. So it's funny how these things are sort of like just re-skinned a lot of it.
Are you a fan of Jimmy's Jobs of the Future? Hi, I'm Sonny, one of the producers behind the show. Have you ever thought, my business deserves to be in the spotlight too? Well, you're not alone. Companies reach out to us all the time, asking us to create podcasts and digital video content for them. But until now, we've only taken on a limited amount of projects. But here's the good news. In 2025, we're expanding. Our production company, Boxlight, is now ready to help more businesses like yours tell their stories with high-quality, white-label content. Curious to see what we can do or how much it might cost? Head over to boxlight.io. You'll find examples of our work and even a podcast calculator to explore your options. That's boxlight.io. We'd love to help you shine in 2025. Now, back to Jimmy.
So how are you going about, and how have you done this in terms of repositioning yourselves? Like, how have you gone about telling people this? And I might be asking as somebody who runs a podcast and is now providing B2B podcast services, how you actually do this is live mentoring for you.
We not very successfully, As I said, we've literally just started talking about it just because I haven't had a chance. Firstly, it was an incredibly technical challenge, right? I had to take existing product and we had to re-architect the tech so that scaled. So we have now like the single front-end code base, single back-end code base, but a huge amount of customization for each of the communities. So if we improve one feature for one app, it ships them for all of those apps. So that was incredibly complex, and massive kudos to my unbelievably incredible tech team for doing that. So I was kind of under a rock while we were doing that. So the first Soho Works app actually took us 14 months. But now we can have a new app live in 2 weeks. So that's how we had to kind of focus on that. And then at the same time, we were getting all this inbound, and we have over 600 people on a wait list, Jimmy. I haven't even spoken about this. It's really mental. So like this has all happened simultaneously. So yeah, as I said, the lovies happened. It kind of forced that I have to start talking about it. But we actually have a new brand, which I've also, you get the spoiler alert, but because what we did actually is we've now restructured the business where I have an operating team who manage my original community, the Dots, day to day. And then we consider the Dots as one of our clients. And then alongside all of our other partner apps. And we're now running this thing up here. Yeah. For ages, we were just calling it Mothership because we had nothing else to call it. And we've called it the most uninspiring pivot of a name ever, but it's called Dots Connect. And so Dots Connect now powers all of these apps, including the Dots being one. And the team who run the Dots day to day have to pitch for new features alongside all of my other clients. But
that's really interesting. That is, well, I think the Dots Connect, I mean, we toyed with what we were going to call Boxlight and whatever. And we did think about calling it Jimmy's Jobs Creative at one point, but I was like, I just don't think it quite works. But it is funny. But it's so interesting asking people where their name came from, because I think it's a real, like, unlocked question for entrepreneurs because they spend so long about it. And yours is all about connecting the dots, right? We did that on the first episode.
Yeah, and then...
so I think the Dots Connect works really well. So what kind of features are people pitching for that?
In the early days, it was actually a huge amount of brand customization, so they don't look like that. So the brands we work with, Jimmy, are like, you know, it's Apple, it's Soho House, it's Freeze. They like literally, you know, they were my early few clients. So it was just making sure that while it was a white label, it felt very distinctly the brand. It doesn't look like a gross sort of thing with the logo in the corner. And it feels very their brand look and feel. So actually,
I hear Apple care about their brands quite. I hear they're quite sort of like.
So that was the gnarly bit in the beginning, because. Yeah, we had the architecture, but we needed it to be scalable, but we have to make them look very different. So there's a huge amount of like front end or what you look at as a member customization on every app. And then actually it was all around more the community management side. So it was more the admin tools that the community managers could have. So example of that is, as I said, you could post an event on the app, you RSVP, and then you can see all the attendees. We suddenly realized loads of our partners were manually creating group chats in the app around the attendees. So we literally just created a button that allows them to instantly create a group of everyone that's going to their event, so they can then communicate with people before the event, after the event, drop images in. So it's kind of been a real collaboration with all our partners. And we actually catch up with them. We're very hands-on. So we call it proper white glove, where we get feedback from all of them that helps improve the product for everyone. So it's been kind of magical to do that cross-collaboration. And I think the final thing was the integrations. You know, it's very complex integrations we're doing. So, you know, how to access a building. You shake the phone and you get a wallet card to access a building. Those sort of types of complex integrations were very mind-blowing, but really fun for my tech team. They love problems.
So where do you see the sort of future of this going, right? Like everything is a kind of like community. And I guess also where's the sort of sweet spot? Because it is hard with these things, isn't it? Like you said, it's 1,000, 10,000 people. Yeah. I imagine 10,000 is sort of pushing at it. But like, what do you see as the future of community?
What do I see the future of community? I mean, the future is community, isn't it? You know, I'm going to be really candid, Jimmy. It's been such a rocket ship ride recently. It's been very hard to kind of take stock. I think what's really exciting is just the sheer amount of people that are interested in this. And I would really love really great communities to be more sustainable. I think for me, if I can help communities that, you know, weren't able to be as sustainable as they could be through better commercializing their communities, that really excites me.
Yeah.
So we've done a couple of pro bono projects because I can't help myself, and my CEO always wants to kind of kill me when I do them. But, we did one for the Brit School because I love the Brit
did
School.
you?
Yeah. And so we look after their community. So, there's these ones where I just still, the enterprise keeps the lights on and the food's on the table, but there's some other communities that the Days Club community, for example, is a Gen Z, very diverse community that are all supporting each other to become creators, and that really excites me as well. So it's fun sort of doing the more sort of, I guess, pro bono ones that have social heart as well as the actual ones.
Yeah, no, there's a run club that I use, and it's a COVID lockdown story, and it's brilliant, and I can't tell you how good of a kind of community it is. And they do these like run events. I mean, it's like 4 times a week, right? And the guys that run this, I'm like, this must be close to a full-time job. Like, it's kind of crazy that you put in. I'm so appreciative of it. And one of the big problems they get is like, honestly, the tickets for the track sessions sell out in like 10 minutes. But they don't even, I'm not even sure sell out is the right phrase because they're all free. And I've said to them, look, I think you should just charge £1 or something. Just to like, even if it's for you guys to go and have drinks afterwards or whatever, like by all means. And they absolutely kind of like refuse to do it. And I get it. I totally get why they're doing it. But I also just think like, I just want them to be kind of sustainable and, all this stuff, like it does cost like to run these things and whatever. Yeah. And it's very kind they do it out of generosity of their own hearts. But I just, like how you make these things sustainable, I think is really, like is a kind of key question for these things. Because this thing has like, genuinely, it was like 1 run a week. And now you can be doing something every night of the week with these guys. And it's brilliant. It's such a good kind of thing.
That's what I've loved about collaborating with our partners, because we have 2 tiers in our apps. You can be on a VIP tier or a non-VIP tier. So some of the partners have leveraged it so that they've got freemium members on there, but then use the product to upsell. Because you're right, if you love something and you value something, you will pay for it. And so, but you also want to make it accessible, and you also want to show them the benefit of paying, And so, I mean, I'm part of an entrepreneurs community called ICE, which is where we first met. It was, it was really cheap in the early days, or was it even free when I joined? Anyway, they ranked up the prices. I continue to pay, because I get value. Why? Because no one understands a founder like another founder. Yeah. If I need advice, I want to go to another founder. And that's why I'm loving powering a small business community, because that is amazing. Are you doing the ISIS group? No, they can't afford me, Jimmy.
Fees aren't that high.
Could you cut that? I love you.
No, I think we should talk about ICE as well. That is community and that is entrepreneurial. But what do you give us an idea? What do your prices start at? Like,
so we start at £3,900 a month, and we go up from there. And it depends on the complexity of integration. So, some of our partners. Some of our partners have incredibly complex technology stacks. So we don't do, for example, their CRM, so where they own their membership. Our partners, that continues to sit on their side because they should own their membership, not us. Yeah. So we overlay onto partners' CRM, say it could be Salesforce, and then we integrate all their different revenue streams. So the more integrations, the more we cost. And also every member app that we do, you get up to 1,000 members as free as part of that core package, but we then start charging from over 1,000 members per member. So you
can use it via Salesforce for free then up to 1,000 people?
So for the paid members, up to 1,000. So anyone on that VIP tier.
Right, yeah.
And so they can add as many free members. So technically you could have a community of 1 million people and only 1,000 people are paying, and I'm not getting extra money for the amount of members. But really that's there to incentivize us to help our partners make more money. But and it's funny going back to your original point, Jimmy, you're right. Again, no one's going to download an app if they're not getting value for it. But if you join a community and pay for that community, you're getting value for it already. We just overlay and connect between those activations.
Yeah, I can see that. So coming back to the live mentoring session, I often think about this with Jimmy's Jobs, right? Because like we've got a sort of like we do have a community, but like when we get a guest on, like I like it partly in terms of like we've got like a couple of like informal WhatsApp groups and whatever, but we don't really use it or harness it as well as we could. Occasionally I'll be like, oh, we've got this guest coming on, have you got any questions or anything like that? And actually it's really useful. But sometimes we put that on LinkedIn as well, like, because that's part of a community as well, like a little bit. And yeah, and I'm always worried about like putting real effort into the community in terms of like creating a separate thing, because I think, oh, it's going to be another thing to manage, it's another thing to deal with. And so on. So I'm just sort of slightly rambling now. But like, I do like firmly believe in this. I think it's really interesting. And actually having that paid membership thing is really interesting.
But I think the most important thing, and funnily enough, there's a lot of brands on our wait list that are in your sort of position. They're thinking about it, but they're not there yet. If I get on call with them, I will say, you are not ready for us yet.
Yes.
The best way to work out if you have a community is to do stuff in the real world first. Start doing actual live mentoring. Start bringing together people and see if there is that stickiness. If there is, then overlay onto that stickiness. So we look after a member club without a club called Adorium, which is entrepreneurs, investors, and friends of. They've been going for maybe 6-7 years. They've been doing supper clubs, bringing everyone together. It's really great biz dev for everyone. That was going before we overlaid. We just overlay onto the magic that was already happening. So I would never say never go to a digital solution for a community first. You need to work out if you actually have a community first. And then you can overlay a digital solution. The advantage of a digital solution, it then can make your community scalable. So one of the key things that we kind of train our partners in is we have a dashboard that shows you the most engaged members of your community. So the ones that are engaging with the app most often. Those are the ones you can then empower to lead the community for you. They're the ones that can start doing events for you. They're the ones that can start running groups for you. So with that data, it allows you to take a community from, say, 100 people to 1,000 to 10,000. Yeah. Because you're actually, the best communities I work with are communities that are built from the bottom up, not from the top down. You can't be scalable. You can't have, 100 Jimmys looking after all the regions around the world. You have to find those advocates in your community that can do what you're doing for you. And that's where data and digital comes in, but you still first have to prove you have a community in the first place.
So what else do you talk people through? Let's get this so we can scale pips.
Yeah.
What else are the things that you say to people? Because that is that is genuinely, because we've done some live events and it does sort of bring it together. Like that is a very good test actually to kind of do it and so on.
Well, I think the live events is really interesting because you also need to tune in. Are they coming to see you talk and the person? Or where the indication of a community is, are they talking to each other before and after? And can you just not get them out because they want to network so much? That's a community. A community talks to each other, right? Yeah. And that's the power of then overlaying a digital solution, because all the things they're trying to do in a room, meet interesting people, get help, get advice, build those relationships, that can then be translated digitally. But we actually, as I said, we do white glove with all our partners. So we have a playbook that we have created that really takes everyone from the beginning to the end. Yeah. Actually, the most important bit before you even go live with the product is the first couple of months, like preceding it, and this is something I learned from the amazing Nick Jones at Soho House, but building a group of founding members who can basically help seed the app before it goes live. But also, Jimmy, I made every single mistake you could possibly make building a digital community on the dots. Like, honestly, it was... So I'd say this playbook is part everything I've learned from the partners that I work with, part everything I've learned from the books I've read and everything like that. But actually, it's also everything I mucked up at the dots. That wasn't scalable. That was the wrong solution. So, for example, when I launched the dots, I launched with a load of influencers thinking this would be really great. We'll get all these really influential people on the platform, and wouldn't that be brilliant? Biggest disaster. Influencers don't care about engaging. Like, they want to look good, but if someone DMs them, they're not going to get back to them. So I re-engineered with our partners going, your founding members should be people that are passionate about your brand, that you can trust to actually do the things you want, who will get back to the people if they DM, will help answer questions in those early days to fuel that early engagement.
Yeah.
Celebrity is the worst person possible because they are busy. They have not got time to reply to someone in their DMs. You want those rising stars, not those people will get more value by being on Instagram. So yeah, I think the other really important thing for us is vetting that the partners we work with, it's right for them. So we don't work with people unless they're ready for us, because it's going to be a waste of money for you if it's not a real community yet.
And what makes good traits in the companies that you work for? What makes a good community manager?
Do you know, funny enough, right at the beginning, we train them to think about themselves as community curators, not managers. So a community manager is someone who it feels like you should be managing everything across a community. And that is the opposite way. A community curator should be listening to the community. What do they need? What do they need help with? And empower them to build the community for you. So going back to the kind of Soho Works example, I learned so much from that first white label because they were doing this already before we worked with. But actually, the vast majority's events at Soho Works are not run by the Soho Works team. It's run by their members. So, for example, they had a monthly Write Club event where writers would come together. It was led by a writer at Soho Works, and they were doing it on a monthly basis. And then that has now translated to they run the group in the app. And so, but what you need, going back to your question of community manager or community curator, you need someone who listens and sees what the community is doing and empowers them to do that kind of stuff. A community manager, what I find so funny, because there are other products obviously competing us, but I've been doing this for so long because of the dots. I can see them making all the mistakes I made like 6 years ago. I'm like, oh, bless you. But they are training people to create content and blast their community all the time. That is fine if you've got great content, but the problem is that's not scalable. Yeah. And so what we suggest to our community curators, yes, if you have great content, you want to share it. But at the same time, you need your community to become content creators. You need them to be running group chats, asking questions, hosting events for you, because that just leads to more engagement, which means then when you post content, you reach a bigger audience. So yeah, it's all about sort of re-engineering that. It's not an insta just share everything as much content as possible situation. It's quality content over quantity content, and let the community become the creators with you.
Yeah, that's right. I completely agree with that. So what are some of the best communities that you're part of? Because you mentioned as well, we met through a community group. Well, two. It was Silicon Valley Comes to UK, and then ICE sort of embedded our friendship.
Do you know what? Funny enough, there's still two of my favourite. I would love to work with both. Yeah. Yesterday, I was literally at the London Partners.
The Growth Summit.
Yeah, and I was just, Janet Coyle is like almost my favourite human on this entire planet.
She's brilliant.
And Janet, you know, when I first started the Dots, I was probably a couple of years in, I was part of one of their early growth summits. And we went over to the Valley and had this amazing kind of 3 days of going and meeting Cal, who's the founder of Slack, and going to Meta, and et cetera, et cetera. But the friends, going back to community, the women I met on that bus have become my closest friends. And they're the ones I bat phone if I've got a problem. So it's like the amazing Ella Golding who runs Zinc. So Zinc obviously is if you've never heard of Zinc, it's Entrepreneur's First, that's all about helping solve the world's biggest problems, bringing founders together to help solve the world's biggest problems. So Ella was on that bus with me. And so those women have become so fundamental to my life. So funnily enough, it was great to go and meet Cal at Slack, and what a legend, but actually no value came from that for my business. The value came from that trip was the women I met on it and how we've supported each other over the years. And we actually had dinner together about a month ago, and it was at the new Kensington Roof Garden. So it was just wonderful getting us all together. Yeah. So that's one of my favourite networks is London Partners, and then ICE, which is just amazing as well. I've tried probably every founder network, I think, in Britain. Maybe there's a few I haven't heard.
I bet you have, yeah.
But I've churned out of most of them. I think what I found valuable about ICE, it's slightly later stage founders.
Yeah.
So you're back to that kind of, we're all in the same boat, but I'm busy. I wish I had more time to give to other people, but I'm busy. So being in a peer-to-peer group where you can help each other is very useful. And so, ICE has been, I think, my favorite community.
Yeah.
I just need to power their blooming community now. Any sponsors who want to power the ICE community, you get access to all the top entrepreneurs in the UK.
That's great. And what jobs have you hired for building this? And just generally, what changes are you seeing in the job market? Because it was very interesting when you came on 4 years ago. You were talking about you don't need to be a techie to work in technology companies. Yeah. They were hiring lots of copywriters, producers, etc. Mm-hmm. Obviously now everyone talks about AI, so let's touch on that a little bit. But I'd be interested in your thoughts on AI and the future of jobs.
Yeah, I think it's really fascinating for us. So the whole growth of my team has come through the engineering team. Yeah. Because of the white labeling. So all of that expansion has come through there. Engineers. And so, but in terms of what has been interesting in terms of AI is things like starting to reduce some of the mundane tasks they were doing. So every time we build a new feature, we have to build tests around that feature to make sure when you click here, it doesn't break, which is very complex when you have multiple apps and you're deploying a new feature to multiple apps because you can't break it across anywhere. But the team use AI now to do the initial write of the test. They still have to check it, but and that was always the bit my developers hate most, right? It's the really mundane bit. And there's this whole thing in tech, that last 5% is the worst because it's so boring. So it's helped with that kind of cycle. Yeah. We also have now a language model that sits behind the dots that removes offensive language, which is now got a lot more AI based in there to really stop any abusive, because a big fear of some of my partners is you get people being awful and you suddenly got Facebook on your hands. Sorry, I'm really laying into Meta. I should start saying X, but I think it's because I deleted X from my phone, so I kind of forget X exists, apart from when Elon sort of pops up.
When I re-listened to the episodes earlier this week, I did find it funny because it was literally just before the 2020 US presidential election. And here we are recording 2 days after the 2024 presidential election. A whole week has felt like deja vu in lots of different ways. It's like, let's not go over all. I haven't processed it all yet.
No, I haven't processed it. I didn't sleep much that night. But yeah, so what was I saying? Where were we at?
We're talking about jobs, AI impact.
So in terms of my own business, it's definitely, made a massive impact, from tools to help our communities, like AI that removes offensive language and learns as it goes, because it's amazing how, words evolve. But I think in terms of, we've done loads of sit downs of like, what more could we do in AI? But we're like almost the opposite product. It's a community. It's got to be human. Like we can't have AI like writing back to other people. You'd end up just having the bots chat to the bots. So it's been more from an operational efficiency level than from a, and then the same with just, just efficiency across the board. Like, the DOTS help desk, for example, just being able to just make that whole thing a lot more efficient. So it's been more operational efficiency. I think of it's tough, right? Because it's really hard to disentangle what's happening now with AI with the fact we've gone through COVID and a flat economy. So, you're looking at the tech industry has shaved at least 30% off its workforce. And, one of the only mega tech companies that hasn't cut jobs is Apple, but they did a hiring freeze. But they did protect their teams. So, is this what's coming? Or is this just because of the economic stagnation that we're currently sitting in? I think for the roles that you were just talking about, like in terms of copywriting and production, the ones that are doing really well are the ones that are adopting AI to augment what they're doing. The ones that don't, it will be left out. Because you can become so much more efficient, but with that efficiency means it's more competitive to the ones that aren't.
It is nuts how much content we're able to churn out now.
Yeah.
Like it's changed so much in that 4 years. What do you use it for?
Me personally,
personally,
I'm dyslexic, Jimmy. It's changing my life.
Let's talk about dyslexia though, because it was interesting. I keep banging on about go back and listen to the episode. Like it was interesting because you basically talked about all the problems that dyslexia brought. And for people, I'm dyslexic as well. You embrace it more than I do. And you talk about it being a superpower, but you basically talk about all the negatives of dyslexia, and you don't actually say in the episode, what are the benefits of being a dyslexic entrepreneur?
Yeah, God, that was massive oversight. Like, if someone gave me a wand tomorrow and said they could take away my dyslexia, I would just break that wand and run a mile. So 35% of entrepreneurs are dyslexic and 40% are self-made millionaires. And there is a reason for that, is because we think differently. So there was this brilliant piece of Harvard research that basically said that if you think of humans as the most sophisticated robots to date, we just take in information and we synthesize that into problem solving, creative thinking. Dyslexics we take in actually more data. We see more of the world, which means we can get burnout quicker because we're just taking in all this information. But that then means that we're better at connecting dots and we're better at problem solving. And that's why dyslexia correlates with creativity, because I can see solutions incredibly fast. And I thought that was normal until I sort of started getting older and realized it's not. The other thing that dyslexia correlates with is perseverance. And they're not really sure why. Maybe it's because we had challenges when we were young and we had to work really hard to operate in a neurotypical world, to finish exams, get to university. And so there was that very young training of perseverance, and perseverance is obviously probably the most important trait when it comes to entrepreneurship. So I absolutely, and empathy is another correlation with dyslexia, which I find really interesting. And maybe
that's interesting because people would often think of neurodiverse people as probably lacking that as a kind of like
dyslexia. No,
but it
depends which neurodiverse traits you have. So dyslexia, no, that very much correlates with empathy. But with autism can be more blunt. It doesn't mean there isn't deep kindness there at all. It's just it's more. I love working with autistic people. It's amazing. You just always know where you stand, and there's no politics. It's just great. Let's just get stuff done. But yeah, so it's got its superpowers. But I work in tech. I mean, I'd say we're more autistic than not in terms of the makeup of the tech industry. So it's great.
But I do think it's interesting. Like, so much of what I and you try and do, I think, in different ways, is like talent maximization, right? Like, and it's the thing that, like, quite a good question I sometimes think and like to ask politicians and talk to them about is like, what makes you angry? And I've always thought if people not maximizing their talent, like, infuriates me. And it is interesting, this sort of like neurodiversity has become such a bigger issue in the last, we've become so much more aware of it. But I also think, like, you know, particularly as a country, you know, we really need to get back at the races a little bit. And like, if we can learn how to harness that different neurodiversity, like, it really will make us like a superpower, etc. And so it's so interesting to talk to you about it, because I still think there is quite a lot of Britishness about sort of awkward topic, etc.
Yeah, and it's funny, even now sometimes, because I'm so open about it, I sort of almost forget that people have this stigma about it. Even now you'll say, oh yeah, no, I'm dyslexic, and you'll see someone's face like, you know, or they'll just be really blunt, oh, you poor thing, and you're like, okay, no, right. Recompute. But, you know, I mean, hey, when we were like cave people, you know, it was definitely an autistic child who worked out how to rub sticks together to make fire. You know, like, this is, I think, where we've evolved to is probably down to a lot of that different minds that did look at things differently and helped us through.
Who are some of the dyslexic entrepreneurs that we might have?
So the most famous is obviously Richard Branson, and massive thanks to him to being so open about it, because no one, I don't think, before Richard really was. But Steve Jobs was dyslexic, autistic, ADHD, and they think Einstein was, even though there wasn't really those sort of tools back then. But you've got people like Anita Broderick, you've got people like Joe Malone, the amazing Holly Tucker, so the Black Farmer, it just all these brilliant people with dyslexic brains. But I mean, I think if you walk around a room of founders, you know, and asked, are you dyslexic or not, the majority will probably be somewhere on the neurodiverse spectrum. ADHD is another great one for entrepreneurship, because I have learned a lot about neurodiversity since I've become really open about it. And I always thought ADHD was like, you know, they used to call it naughty boy syndrome, you know, they're distracted and everything like that. But actually ADHD, when you're interested in a subject matter, can manifest into hyperfocus. So, you know, people who are very driven can also have ADHD. And so, yeah, it's been a really interesting journey watching about how all those things can interlock. And you tend not to just have one. So my husband's convinced I also have ADHD. I've just never been diagnosed, because what I focus on, I'm focused on. But I can't see the pool of clothes on the floor. Or maybe that's just my excuse.
Yeah, I definitely think I have more traits of ADHD as the years go by. Right, yeah. I wonder what my wife would say. All this. She'll never get this far into a podcast, so it's fine. never find it.
Do you know what? It was so sweet. My husband last night, when I came back from the awards, he suddenly got the guilt and he goes, should I have been there? And I was like, oh, bless you. I was like, he hates that stuff. So I was like, I'll never force you to go. And he suddenly got this guilt that actually his wife got an award. Maybe he should have been there to celebrate.
We've also done the Squiggly Careers podcast together, and we're big fans of what Helen and Sarah are doing at Squiggly. But tell us about your Squiggly career.
It is so insanely squiggly. Dyslexic, didn't ever think I'd finish school. Madly finished school, worked very, very hard. No one in my family had ever been to uni, so no one ever thought I'd go to uni, but madly I got into uni. And I did economics and maths. And so I was a very strange graduate, because I did actually become an economist. So I became an economist for the fast stream civil service. So I developed a very dodgy algorithm that measured drug harm, which they still use today. So when they say, like, drugs cost the economy like 1.8 billion or whatever, I'm sure it's much more than that. That's actually the algorithm I developed way back then. Anyway, so government wasn't for me. I'm way too fast moving. So I jumped ship and I joined the Brit Awards as a event coordinator. Actually, my job at the Brit Awards was to organise their goodie bags, which was one of the funnest jobs ever, because I just called people around, and like anything I loved, I just phone them up. So, for example, wellies at festivals are really in there, and I got these Union Jack wellies made for everyone.
Cool.
So yeah, that was a fun, not a future-facing necessarily career. And then I moved to Australia, and I got a job at MTV, but in a business strategy role. So they realised no one at MTV could do maths. And I'd been working at the Brit Awards and had an economics and maths degree. So they put them together. And so madly, I must have been about 23. And they asked me to develop the business model to launch MTV in New Zealand. And so I developed the business model to launch a new channel into a new region while we were in Australia. And then I applied for the head of marketing role. Never had done marketing in my life. And very long story short, they didn't give it to me, but then the person they did hire was terrible. And so they gave it to me. So I was then head of marketing for MTV in New Zealand. I had to move to the country reading a dummy's guide to marketing. But this is as social media hit. I had no budget. I had no marketing knowledge. So I just started hacking Facebook, which had really just launched around there. So then that was my first hurrah into sort of digital media and working around tech. And so we were doing stuff on Facebook and MySpace when MySpace was big. And then I started my first tech company. Again, had no idea what I was doing. Didn't have a computer science degree. How naive was I? Of course I can start a tech company. So I founded my first tech company in Australia, which I learned a lot at. I managed to get a tiny little exit. That exit then seed funded the capital for the Dots, and the rest is history. And obviously Dots has also evolved. So we were B2C community, and now we're B2B, and oh my God, it's so much easier.
Amazing.
And yeah,
Terrific.
I once convinced the head of Air New Zealand to give me an aeroplane and do an in-flight concert from New Zealand to Australia.
Wow.
And then I also convinced Dizzy Rascal to fly to New Zealand to perform on that gig. So
you had Dizzy Rascal performing above, I should know what that piece of sea is called, the thingy strait, the Australia-New Zealand strait.
Tasman.
Hey?
Tasman.
No, that's the Tasman.
Oh my God, I'm not very good at geography. You can see my ADHD brain.
So you got Dizzy Rascal, flying Australia to New Zealand, performing in the air.
Yeah, and so literally Dizzy flew to New Zealand. We had to do a rehearsal in a grounded airplane in a airport hangar. We didn't have enough power to power the bass speakers on the plane. So the head of Air New Zealand, who I was collaborating with on the project, he phoned the then Prime Minister of Australia and convinced him, because his private jet had a battery pack that was strong enough, to loan us that battery pack to then be able to put the sort of sound properly in that. So that was John Howard, was it? I can't remember.
Yeah.
And so they flew the battery pack to New Zealand, and we did an in-flight gig with Dizzy. Halfway through, one of the speakers did blow up, so there is actually footage online of the plane filling with smoke. And I remember sitting next to this amazing guy, Stephen Jones, who was head of Air New Zealand. We just looked at each other and go, oh my God, we're just going to die on the Mile High gig. And we called it the Mile High gig, obviously. That was my one and only rock and roll moment.
That's so cool. Excellent.